Welcome to Midn8 Reviews. In this video, I'm going to be rating every feat published in the Player's Handbook, Xanthar's Guide to Everything, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, and Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and rating them on a comprehensive star scale. For reference, the stars are defined not on how good the feats are in theory, but rather on how many characters would want to take them. Feats can be very strong for a particular character, while being bad for the general population of adventurers. A 5-star feat is one that is very strong for nearly every character, or defines many different builds. 4-star feats are defining to a particular build, or strong on many characters, but not a priority compared to 5-star feats. 3-star feats are legitimate options on many or most characters and to do something unique, but generally you have more optimized options. 2-star feats are very niche compared to other options, but there are situations where they are better than your other choices. And 1-star feats have absolutely no justification for being taken, no matter your character archetype. Before we really get into it, let me just start with saying that these ratings aren't meant to tell you how to play. If you enjoy using a feat, take it. At the end of the day, D&D is a game, and games are played to have fun. So if you enjoy a feat, take it. This is meant to be a rating for optimizers, not a rating on the fun scale. And with that out of the way, I'm going to start with the 5-star feats first, because a lot of the reason that low-star feats are bad is because there is a better option. Ability score increase, 5 stars. +2 to a stat is a +1 bonus on every attack and damage roll you make with your weapons, or +1 to your spell save DC, and it increases all your ability checks, saving throws, and dozens of other things tied to your stats, like your AC, your HP, the number of times you can use Bardic Inspiration, spells prepared, and more. Before taking any feat, you should definitely consider if you just want +2 to a stat instead, or 2 +1s to even out to odd stats. Alert, 5 stars. The primary portion of this feat is the massive +5 to initiative bonus. If you go before the enemies in combat, you get an entire extra turn over them, which is huge. The auxiliary bonuses are also decently strong, but the main reason to take this feat is the +5 to initiative. Crossbow Expert, 5 stars. This feat is build defining for the large number of hand crossbow sharpshooter marshals out there, which basically only exists because of this feat. It turns hand crossbows from a relatively bad weapon to an insanely powerful weapon. And although longbow builds without crossbow expert are still viable, hand crossbow versions are generally more powerful due to their extra attack and ability to be in melee range with no complications. Elven Accuracy, 5 stars. Elven Accuracy breaks bounded accuracy in 5th edition due to the massive 2-hit bonus you get, and also has applications for crit fishing. Advantage is relatively easy to come by, and it's just a massive value if you get any source of advantage and make attack rolls with anything other than strength. Also, it's a half-assy, so. Fey Touched, 5 stars. Adding Misty Step to your spell list is very powerful, then you get the extra spell and a half-assy on top. Very good on clerics, druids, paladins, and rangers, and a fine feat to take on any spell-less characters. Great Weapon Master, 5 stars. The power attack ability to take a -5 to your attack roll for +10 in damage is gigantic for melee marshals, who basically rely on this feat to deal damage. You net a significant amount of damage on most enemies with this, especially low AC ones, or when you have advantage on attacks. Inspiring Leader, 5 stars, asterisk. Inspiring Leader represents an absolutely insane amount of HP for your team. If you have 5 characters in your party, this offers you over 2.5 times as much HP as Tough does. This feat does have a stat requirement, but it's just so insane that basically everybody who can take it should, with one caveat. It is entirely redundant if multiple people in your party have it, so coordinate with your party members to figure out who that should be. Polearm Master, 5 stars. Similar to Crossbow Expert, Polearm Master enables not only a bonus action attack, but also a reaction attack, and works not only with Great Weapon Master, but can also work with a shield. It's a powerful option for basically any melee marshal. Resilient, 5 stars. Specifically, Resilient Wisdom and Constitution are both 5 stars, Charisma and Intelligence are 3 stars, Dexterity is 2 stars, and Strength is 1 star. In addition to being a half-assy, Resilient gives you a very important boost to your saving throws. Res Wiz allows you to approach dragons and other scary monsters as a marshal, as well as not be charmed or dominated, whereas Res Con allows you to maintain concentration on spells easily. Res Int and Charisma are relevant against the much rarer but still devastating stun and banishment effects. Dex saves are mostly against damage, and strength saves basically don't exist. Resent and Charisma would be rated 4 stars if you could take the Resilient feat multiple times. Unfortunately, it does not have a clause for taking it multiple times, unlike Elemental Adder. Sharpshooter, 5 stars. Very similar reasoning to Great Weapon Master, power attacking is a huge boon for martial characters. The auxiliary benefits of this feat are also a great enhancement for ranged combat. Ignoring cover and extremely long range are beneficial for most ranged combatants. Ranged martials with multiple attacks need this feat. And finally, rounding out the 5-star feats, we have Tough. Tough gives a very large amount of HP, twice as much as taking Con +2. In fact, taking Tough in Res Con is basically better than just taking +2 Con twice. Tough is very useful at higher levels for getting past HP thresholds, especially getting over 150 HP to not die in one hit to Meteor Swarm, but it also provides a large amount of survivability at any level. Tough beats out other defensive feats below its rank because everybody can take it, and because HP works on nearly everything. Things that kill you without reducing your HP to 0 are pretty rare. The rest of these feats are presented in alphabetical order. Actor, 2 stars. Actor is a half-assy and it has some cool benefits, but it's generally pretty weak. Passing yourself off as a specific other person is pretty niche, but hey, it's a half-assy. As a general rule, it's very difficult for a half-assy to get less than 2 stars, because sometimes you only need 1 stat point, and if it does something, that's better than doing nothing. Artificer Initiate, 2 stars. It's mostly worse than Magic Initiate, but you get a tool, and you can cast the spell with a slot if it's not already on your list. Artificers don't get a Fog Cloud on their spell list, which is usually the best option for Magic Initiate, so it's pretty niche. Athlete, 2 stars. There are some interesting movement bonuses on this feat, but it's a lot worse for mobile except for the half-assy. Bountiful Luck, 4 stars. The chance that you roll a 1 on any particular turn is pretty low. The chance that anybody in your party rolls a 1 before the beginning of your next turn is quite high. This feat offers a large amount of team support for any halflings that can take it at the cost of your reactions. Charger, 4 stars. This might come as a surprise to a lot of people, but Charger is a very good feat in one particular circumstance. It's way better than Great Weapon Master in Tier 1 for melee martials. Before you get an extra attack, Charger limiting you to 1 attack doesn't really matter. It gives you extra mobility, and the extra damage on your attack is way more valuable without the 2-hit penalty from power attacking. Rogues can also get a lot of use out of it in Tier 1 since they can use it every other turn with their bonus action Disengage. Chef. I really debated a lot on this one between 1 and 2 stars, but I finally decided to give it 2 stars. It's worse than Healer and Inspiring Leader by a lot. The only redeeming thing about this feat is that it's a half-assy with Constitution that has some team support, and most other Constitution half-asses aren't very good. Speaking of Constitution half-asses, Crusher is a great one, 4 stars. If you deal damage with bludgeoning weapons, Crusher's pretty good. I think Crusher is better enough than Slasher that it actually makes Mauls better than Greatswords for 2-handed non-polearm options. Partially because Slasher does not have a Constitution option, and partially because giving monsters disadvantage on attacks is only sometimes useful, but having an advantage on attacks is basically always useful, and moving monsters is better than slowing monsters. Defensive Duelist, 2 stars. This feat does offer you consistent defense at the cost of a reaction every time you want to use it. The downside of this feat is that it only applies to 1 attack per turn, and you have to be wielding a finesse weapon, plus it has a stat requirement. Often just worse than +2 dex, or another defensive feat like Moderately Armored. Dragon Fear, 2 stars. This feat is partially bad because Dragonborn aren't very good, it's a half-assy, and this is an upgrade on the normal breath weapons, but the cases where this beats out your other feats are pretty rare. Notably, Conquest Paladins can capitalize on this. Dragonhide, 2 stars. Usually you want to cast Mage Armor instead, but there are situations where you want the half-assy, where you care about turning your unarmed strikes into natural weapons. Drow High Magic, 3 stars. At-will detect magic is nice, and it has some cool out-of-combat utility with the other spells, and potential combat applications from Dispel Magic. Better than Eldritch Adept for Eldritch Sight too. Dual Wielder, 2 stars. Even if dual wielding was good, this feat would still be slightly worse than +2 to a stat when in combat. The ability to use a better weapon usually nets you +1 damage per attack, and you get no 2-hit bonus. Drawing and stowing 2 weapons doesn't matter too much when most adventurers have weapons drawn anyway. Dungeon Delver, 3 stars. Sometimes you want resistance to damage dealt by traps. Good in a campaign with lots of dungeons. Durable, 2 stars. This is a comp half-assy, but the benefit is terribly minor. It's actually only really usable with Dwarven Fortitude, also 2 stars. Dwarven Fortitude would maybe be a good feat if you could use the dodge action to heal out of combat, but even then it's relatively not good value since healing potions are so cheap. Eldritch Adept, 2 stars. The fact that it requires you to have the spellcasting or packed magic feature already greatly limits its application, and a lot of the options are just worse than other feats. However, it can be used by Abjuration Wizards to refill their wards with Armor of Shadows, or for team synergy with Darkness and Devil's Sight. Elemental Adept, 3 stars. If you do a lot of elemental damage of one type of spells, this is pretty good. It's generally pretty easy to just pick other spells and use a different damage type, but if you want to go all out on fire, you'll need Elemental Adept. Fade Away, 2 stars. It's a bad half-assy, but it has its uses, particularly at low levels when invisibility still matters. Fey Teleportation, 2 stars. Take Fey Touch instead unless you really want another language for some reason. A first level spell is generally worth a lot more than a language though. Fighting Initiate, 3 stars. Sometimes you want a fighting style. Flames of Phathalagus, 3 stars. It's a fine half-assy if you deal a lot of fire damage. Grappler, 1 star. To understand why this feat is so abysmal, you have to understand a few things about grappling. Typical grappling technique involves grappling monsters, then knocking them prone. Because their speed is 0, they can't get up. Grappling also requires a free hand to hold the creature with. Grappler grants 2 benefits. The first is that it gives you advantage on attack rolls against creatures you are grappling. If you knock the creature prone, you already have advantage on attacks against it. Furthermore, for this advantage to even be useful, you need to be wielding a weapon, which means that you're not using a shield. For those reasons, this benefit is largely useless. The second benefit that it grants is the ability to use an action while grappling a creature to make a second grapple check, restraining that creature on a success. This is absolutely never worth using. You can make an athletics check to shove the target prone instead for largely the same effect, except the creature no longer has disadvantage on attacks against you, and this only takes one of your attacks instead of your action. Furthermore, you lose advantage on any attacks that you would make against the creature, your speed is reduced to 0, and all other creatures have advantage on attacks against you. You could have a party of entirely ranged users, so that proning monsters is somehow terrible, and the grappler feat would still be terrible. I feel like I cannot emphasize how much nothing this feat does. Just because the feat is called Grappler does not mean that you have to or should take it if you want to grapple things. Gunner, 4 stars. Even if your campaign doesn't include guns, this feat allows ranged attackers to not suffer disadvantage on melee attacks while also being a half-assy, so it's fine on Eldritch Blast users and Longbow users. Healer, 4 stars. Healer is worse than Inspiring Leader, since it has to be used reactively. However, bad Inspiring Leader is still Inspiring Leader. Healer also has no stat requirement, can function on the same team as an Inspiring Leader, and has sweet synergy with Thief Rogues. Heavily Armored, 2 stars. It's a half-assy that can give you an extra AC. It's fine. Heavy Armor Master, 3 stars. This feat is really good in Tier 1, but rapidly falls off compared to Tough. It's a half-assy though, so even if it falls off compared to Tough, it's okay later. Infernal Constitution, 4 stars. Damage resistances aren't that important, but they're stapled to a con half-assy. Keen Mind, 2 stars. It's a half-assy that does some RP and exploration-oriented stuff. Lightly Armored, 1 star. Cast Mage Armor instead. Linguist, 3 stars. If you want to know more languages, take this feat. Also, it's a half-assy. Lucky, 3 stars. A lot of people really like Lucky, and to be fair to the feat, it is a lot of fun. It feels really good to turn a failure into a success because of your luck points, and you won't find a feat more versatile anywhere. But on nearly every character, you can take a feat that will improve your chances of success at the thing you want to be lucky at. Marshals can take Res Wiz, and mages can take Alert for the most common things you want to be rerolling. And for reasons that are beyond the scope of this video, flat bonuses are largely better than rerolls, particularly at high levels. The one thing that Lucky does that no other feat captures is the ability to reroll counterspell and dispel checks, but even then you should max out your casting stat first. Mage Slayer, 3 stars. Doesn't even make you particularly good at slaying mages, but it does some things. Notably, it breaks concentration better with any sort of damage, not just weapon attacks. Magic Initiate, 4 stars. I put Magic Initiate here primarily to be taken on martials. The general best use for Magic Initiate is to take Fog Cloud on martials, so you have another aspect that you can approach combats from. But there are a few other uses like getting Skag Trips into Familiar on rogues. Martial Adept, 2 stars. This feat is basically only good on Battle Masters who want some extra maneuvers, and even then it falls off rapidly into higher levels as you get more and more maneuvers just from their class. Medium Armor Master, 2 stars. This is basically the same as Heavily Armored, but only applicable to a smaller subset of characters. Metamagic Adept, 4 stars. This grants sorcerers 2 additional metamagic options, but it also grants bards access to Careful Spell, clerics access to Distant Spell, and anybody access to Subtle Spell. This feat is strong for sorcerers and decent for other casters. Unlike Battlemaster maneuvers, sorcerers only get 4 metamagic options over their career. Mobile, 4 stars. A very strong defensive feat, particularly for monks, but also applicable to other martial classes. Moderately Armored, 4 stars. The thing that sets this feat so far apart from the other armor feats is that Moderately Armored gives access to a shield, which can be anywhere from 2 to 5 AC with auxiliary benefits from your shield, plus Medium Armor in itself offers up to 3 more AC than Light Armor. That means that if you can use the half AC from this feat, get a plain shield and a plain suit of half plate, then you can gain 6 AC. That's better than a shield spell every single turn for free. Amazing value for anybody with light armor, but not medium armor. Mounted Combatant, 3 stars. If you can acquire a large or huge mount and manage to keep it alive, this feat is actually quite good, and it does help you keep it alive. Even with the pseudo-evasion and the redirect, however, there are distinct weaknesses in mounted combat. Movement becomes awkward, disabling effects on your mount disable this feat, and even with this feat, your mount can be defeated by AoE. Observant, 3 stars. It's a half-assy with a relevant bonus. Take this if you want to be perceptive. Orcish Fury, 2 stars. You get a tiny bit of extra damage and a reaction attack once each with your half-assy. Meh. Piercer, 3 stars. You get a minor damage boost every turn and a slightly higher damage boost if you crit. The only reason that this is at 3 stars is because you run out of damage feats to take on Sharpshooter Marshals, and it comes with a half-assy. Poisoner, 4 stars. This feat is largely in the same position as Charger, where it's good in Tier 1, but approaches useless in Tier 2 as more and more enemies become immune. It is slightly better than Charger later, but it's worse earlier due to the gold cost. However, the ability to stack up dozens of poison uses later on to apply to relevant enemies, combined with the fact that it doesn't cancel your extra attack, makes it applicable to a decent number of characters. Prodigy, 3 stars. Sometimes you want a tool and a language more than a half-assy. If you want a half-assy more than a tool and a language, take Skill Expert instead. Ritual Caster, 4 stars. There are a huge number of useful rituals to have on hand, which can add another dimension to martial out of combat. Ritual Caster for Wizard grants you a gigantic amount of utility spells. A Ritual Caster for Cleric grants you some particularly powerful bombs like Forbiddance. Be careful to mind the stat requirement. Savage Attacker, 2 stars. There are particular types of node builds where this is the most efficient damage option, but for most characters this feat is not particularly strong. In Tier 1 it feels like it puts in a lot of work, similar to Lucky, but Charger is usually better. Second Chance, 2 stars. There are theoretical situations where you want a half-assy along with a piece of Lucky, but those situations are not common. Sentinel, 4 stars. Sentinel is one of the only ways to draw aggro in 5th edition, so it's critical for anybody trying to play a tank character. It also offers an easy source of a reaction attack for rogues and has some funny interactions with Polearm Master. Shadow Touched, 3 stars. This feat would be a lot better if first level illusion and necromancy spells existed, and if Fade Touched didn't exist. Invisibility is largely worse than Misty Step, and there are only 8 spells that qualify for the first level choice. Shield Master, 4 stars. The pseudo-evasion effect is very powerful, and the team support from knocking people prone is also strong. It's slightly better on martials than on casters because of the reaction text for the evasion effect, but it's decent on casters too. Skill Expert, 4 stars. Expertise is good. Half-assy is good. Not much more to say here. Skilled, 3 stars. If you want more skills, take Skilled. Skulker, 2 stars. This is the sort of thing you'd expect to find on a half-assy, but there are situations where it's worth taking still. It's just very underpowered when there's not constant light obscurement. Slasher, 3 stars. This is distinctly worse than Crusher, but Slasher still has value for slashing users for the half-assing and defensive support. Spell Sniper, 3 stars. The primary benefit of this feat is ignoring cover on attack-based spell builds, but the range increase is sometimes useful. Squat Nimbleness, 3 stars. You get a bunch of stuff with your half-assing, including negating your small movement speed malice. It's fine. Sverbolin Magic, 4 stars. At-will non-detection is actually quite solid, especially for recharging arcane wards. The rest of the spells are also nice to have on hand. Tavern Brawler, 2 stars. It's a half-assy that does something for grapplers. Telekinetic, 4 stars. It's a half-assy that lets you move people around in combat without provoking opportunity attacks. That's pretty solid. Telepathic, 4 stars. Componentless Detect Thoughts is very invasive and very useful. It's the RP equivalent of Telekinetic. Warcaster, 4 stars. This is worse than Res-Con for maintaining concentration specifically, and it doesn't come with a half-assy, but the ability for mages to dual wield or use a wand and a shield is very powerful, and the opportunity attack stuff is nice too. And sometimes you want even more concentration sustain. Weapon Master, 1 star. This feat is terrible and there's no real reason to ever take this feat. If you really need simple or martial weapon proficiency, most races start with some weapon proficiencies, and you can change them with Tasha's rules. Or you can take a 1 level dip if you can hit the 13 Dex, Strength, Wiz, or Charisma requirement. It's not even interestingly bad. It's just bad. Wood Elf Magic, 3 stars. Longstrider and Pass Without Trace are good spells. Take this if you want to cast them. And that's it. Those are my ratings for every single feat released so far in 5th edition. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more content like this in the future, please subscribe to the channel. I've also started releasing D&D content for free on Patreon whenever I think of something good. If you want to check that out and support the channel some more, there's a link to that in the description. And as always, thanks for watching.